Number 1. Shannon Guess Richardson. It began with a letter, a simple white envelope, neatly addressed and carrying words that would soon make national headlines. Inside was something far more sinister, traces of a deadly biological toxin known as ricin. Within days, two of the most powerful men in America had become the targets of a strange and dangerous plot. And the woman behind it was a small-town actress who had once appeared on The Walking Dead. Shannon Guess Richardson seemed, at first glance, to have the kind of life most people would envy. Born and raised in Texas, she was a mother of 6, a part-time actress, and a familiar face in her local community. Friends described her as talkative, energetic, and ambitious. She took pride in her television appearances, background roles in shows like The Walking Dead and Vampire Diaries, and often spoke of building a bigger career in Hollywood. But behind that image, Shannon's personal life was unraveling. Her marriage to her husband, Nathan Richardson, had grown tense, filled with arguments about finances and custody. By the spring of 2013, she was desperate for control, and that desperation would lead to one of the strangest criminal schemes in modern American history. In May 2013, envelopes containing ricin were sent to President Barack Obama and New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Another was addressed to Mark Glaze, the director of a gun control advocacy group. Each letter contained the same chilling message about gun rights, warning that anyone trying to take away weapons would have to fight for them. The handwriting looked crude, almost theatrical, but the danger was real. Ricin is made from castor beans and can be lethal even in small doses. Federal authorities quickly realized that the sender had both motive and knowledge of chemistry. Soon after, Shannon called the police herself, claiming that her husband had been the one who sent the letters. She said she had discovered suspicious materials at home, castor beans, lye, and instructions for extracting ricin. Her tone was frightened, even cooperative. But investigators noticed something off. The timeline didn't add up. The emails arranging the purchase of the materials came from Shannon's own computer. The postmarks on the letters matched the area near her workplace, and the handwriting looked remarkably like hers. What had begun as a tip against her husband was turning into a confession in disguise. The FBI confronted Shannon with the evidence. At first, she stuck to her story, insisting she was only a witness. But forensic testing found her DNA on the envelopes. When asked how that could be, she faltered. Her version changed again and again until the truth emerged. She had written and mailed the letters herself, hoping to frame Nathan as an act of revenge during their collapsing marriage. The more investigators looked, the stranger it became. An actress staging a biological attack to win a domestic dispute. Federal prosecutors moved fast. Shannon was arrested in June 2013 and charged under laws that had rarely been used since the Cold War, developing and possessing a biological toxin for use as a weapon. She initially pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. The castor beans, the lab supplies, the searches on her computer for how to make ricin. In December 2013, she accepted a plea deal, admitting that she had produced a small amount of the toxin and mailed it to public officials. During the hearings, the courtroom fell quiet as her actions were read aloud. She told the judge she never meant to harm anyone, that she was under emotional strain and had made what she called a horrible mistake. Prosecutors disagreed. They argued that the plan had been deliberate, calculated, and potentially deadly, a violation that could have endangered countless mail handlers and staff members, not just the intended targets. On July 16, 2014, Shannon Guess Richardson was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The judge called the act an extraordinary abuse of trust and responsibility. News of the sentencing spread quickly. Media outlets labeled it the Walking Dead ricin case. Fascinated by the contrast between her Hollywood dreams and the grim reality of her crime. For Shannon, the fame she had once chased arrived in the worst possible way. Not through a breakout role, but through a federal mugshot. Today, she remains in federal custody, serving her sentence far from the cameras she once sought. Her husband divorced her soon after the arrest, gaining custody of their children. The letters she mailed never reached their targets, intercepted before they could cause harm. Yet the story of Shannon Guess Richardson stands as a reminder of how quickly ambition and anger can spiral into disaster, and how a single act of deception can destroy an entire life. That was the story of Shannon Guess Richardson, a chilling case where fiction blurred with reality and nearly turned deadly. Up next, another tale where truth proves far stranger than imagination. Number 2. Claudia Haro. It was a calm spring evening in Los Angeles when a knock came at the door of Hollywood stuntman Garrett Warren. He was expecting a delivery, maybe a neighbor, not the man who would change his life forever. When Garrett opened the door, the stranger asked, "Are you Garrett?" Before he could answer, 6 shots rang out. Garrett fell to the floor as bullets tore through his body. He would survive that night, but one of his eyes would not. And the person who had ordered the attack was someone he once loved. Before her name filled headlines, Claudia Haro was known for her beauty, charm, and talent. She had appeared in movies like With Honors and Casino, and she was once married to actor Joe Pesci. In the world of Los Angeles glitz, Claudia seemed destined for success. Friends described her as radiant, ambitious, and fiercely protective of her family. But behind that Hollywood image was a storm of jealousy, custody battles, and resentment that would spiral into one of the most shocking celebrity-linked crimes of the 2000s. Claudia had married stuntman Garrett Warren in 1998. Garrett was well respected in the film industry, known for performing dangerous stunts and training A-list actors. The couple had a daughter together, and for a while, life seemed glamorous and stable. But their marriage crumbled quickly, ending in a bitter divorce in 1999. Arguments over money and custody became heated. Garrett was granted primary custody of their daughter, a decision Claudia could never accept. What began as heartbreak soon turned into obsession. On May 20th, 2000, Garrett was home in Westlake Village when the doorbell rang. Standing outside was a man holding an envelope. Moments later, Garrett was shot multiple times, in the chest, neck, and face. He collapsed, but managed to crawl into another room where his mother called 911. Against all odds, he survived. Doctors later removed his right eye, but his determination never wavered. From his hospital bed, he began to help investigators find whoever had tried to end his life. Detectives quickly realized this was not a random attack. There was no theft, no sign of forced entry. Whoever ordered the hit wanted Garrett silenced. The shooter, once caught, revealed he had been hired, and that a woman had arranged the job through a middleman. The investigation stretched on for years, uncovering a network of people connected through small payments and cryptic phone calls. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to point back to one name: Claudia Haro. The evidence was chilling. Police found Garrett's address written on a slip of paper inside a car belonging to Claudia's brother. Witnesses claimed she had offered money to get rid of her ex-husband. Still, the case moved slowly. Too slowly. Claudia denied everything, and without direct proof, prosecutors waited. It would take nearly a decade before the full story came together. In 2005, new testimony emerged linking Claudia directly to the man who had organized the shooting. Phone records and cash exchanges painted a clear picture of conspiracy. The hitman confirmed she had paid for the attack because she was furious about losing custody of her daughter. The glamorous actress who once walked red carpets was now accused of hiring killers. By 2012, the case finally reached its conclusion. Facing overwhelming evidence, Claudia Haro pleaded no contest to attempted murder and principal use of a firearm. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, onlookers, and those still shocked by how far she had fallen. She spoke little during sentencing, her voice soft, her eyes down. The judge handed down a sentence of 12 years and 4 months in state prison. For Garrett Warren, the man she had tried to silence, it was a measure of justice. Though the scars, both visible and unseen, would never fully heal. Garrett rebuilt his life piece by piece. He returned to the film industry, working as a stunt coordinator on major Hollywood projects and mentoring young performers. His story became one of survival and resilience, the man who refused to die, even after losing an eye and nearly everything else. Claudia, meanwhile, served her time quietly, far away from the limelight she once craved. She was released in 2019, having completed her sentence. But her name remains forever tied to a crime that blurred the line between Hollywood fantasy and real-life horror. The tabloids had called it the Hollywood hitwoman case, not because of explosions or stunts, but because it exposed how jealousy and revenge can twist even the most glamorous lives. What began as a marriage of love ended as an act of violence that echoed across decades. That was the story of Claudia Haro, a reminder that behind the glitter of fame, darkness can still find a stage. Number 3. Zara Phythian. It's hard to imagine that someone who once stood alongside Marvel's biggest heroes could fall so far from grace. Zara Phythian was known to millions as a fierce and skilled martial artist, a face that flickered briefly across the screen in Doctor Strange. But behind that cinematic fame was a secret that would shock even those closest to her. In 2022, her name filled headlines around the world, not for her stunts or her acting, but for a crime that would end her career and her freedom. Before the scandal, Zara's story was one of discipline and success. Born in Nottinghamshire, England, she built her reputation as a world-class martial artist long before she ever stepped onto a film set. By her 20s, she had won multiple world titles, owned a martial arts academy, and trained hundreds of students. To her followers, she was an inspiration, powerful, confident, and dedicated. Together with her husband, Victor Mark, she became part of the tight-knit British stunt community, even appearing in independent action films before landing a minor role in Marvel's Doctor Strange in 2016. But away from the screen, Zara and Victor's lives were darker than anyone realized. In 2016, when Doctor Strange premiered, the couple seemed like a perfect team, instructors, business partners, and a picture of success. Yet behind the polished image, a young woman had been carrying a secret since her teenage years. She would eventually come forward to reveal that Zara and Victor had taken advantage of her trust when she was just a child. When the victim spoke to police years later, her testimony was detailed and consistent. She described repeated incidents that took place over several years during the mid-2000s, beginning when she was only 13. Investigators verified dates, cross-checked travel and teaching schedules, and built a case that revealed a disturbing pattern. The story reached British media quickly, not only because of the seriousness of the charges, but because Zara had been part of one of the world's biggest movie franchises. In April 2022, both Zara Phythian and Victor Mark stood trial at Nottingham Crown Court. They faced multiple counts of abusing a minor. The courtroom heard from witnesses, students, and law enforcement officers who had pieced together years of evidence. Prosecutors painted a portrait of control and manipulation disguised as mentorship. Zara, now in her late 30s, listened quietly as her once-admired reputation collapsed. Through her attorney, she denied all allegations, claiming that the accusations were exaggerated and that her husband was the central figure in the misconduct. But the jury saw it differently. After 2 weeks of testimony, both Zara and Victor were found guilty on 14 counts. The judge, addressing the defendants, said their actions had caused lasting emotional harm and were a gross abuse of trust. In May 2022, Zara Phythian was sentenced to 8 years in prison, while Victor Marque received a longer term of 14 years. The sentence closed the curtain on a career that had once promised global recognition. As the verdict spread, news outlets around the world ran the same stunned headline: Doctor Strange actress jailed. The contrast between her film persona and her real-life crimes became a symbol of how appearances can deceive. Colleagues from the martial arts world expressed disbelief. Marvel fans searched for her brief scene in the movie, many saying it now carried an uncomfortable shadow. In prison, Zara disappeared from public life entirely. Her martial arts school shut down, her online presence vanished, and her projects were erased from promotion pages. Victor Mark remains incarcerated as well. Their victim, who had waited years for justice, said that finally speaking out had freed her from the fear she had carried for most of her life. For many who followed the case, it was a sobering reminder that fame offers no protection from accountability. Zara Phythian's fall from a respected athlete to a convicted criminal was both swift and irreversible. A life that moved from the bright lights of a Marvel set to the gray walls of a prison cell. That was the story of Zara Phythian, a case that showed how even the most disciplined public image can conceal a hidden darkness. Number 4. Amy Locane. It was a warm June night in New Jersey, quiet, suburban, and ordinary, until, in an instant, headlights crossed the center line and everything changed. By the time the noise faded, a 60-year-old woman lay dead, and the driver behind the wheel was someone millions once knew from television. Amy Locane, the bright, energetic actress from Melrose Place, had gone from stardom to tragedy in a single, devastating moment. Before that night, Amy's story sounded like the perfect Hollywood script. Born in Trenton, New Jersey, she began acting in commercials at age 10 and was soon starring in films like Cry Baby opposite Johnny Depp. By her early 20s, she'd landed a breakout role on Melrose Place, the hit 1990s drama that turned its young cast into household names. She had beauty, fame, and a future that looked wide open. When she left Hollywood a few years later to focus on theater and family life back in New Jersey, it seemed like a graceful step away from the spotlight, a new chapter of balance and peace. But on June 27, 2010, everything unraveled. That evening, Amy and her husband attended a friend's barbecue. Witnesses later said she'd had several glasses of wine before getting into her SUV to drive home. On a 2-lane road in Montgomery Township, she sped nearly 60 miles per hour through a 35 zone. At the same time, another car was turning into a driveway. Amy's vehicle slammed into it with such force that both cars spun across the pavement. Inside the struck car were Fred Seaman and his wife, Helene. Helene Seaman, 60 years old, died at the scene. Fred survived but was seriously injured. When police arrived, they found Amy distraught and disoriented. Her blood alcohol level later tested at nearly 3 times the legal limit. Within hours, the local celebrity who had once graced magazine covers was booked on charges of vehicular manslaughter and assault by auto. News spread quickly. A former television star arrested after a fatal crash in her own hometown. At her 2012 trial, prosecutors argued that Amy had been recklessly speeding and intoxicated, turning a preventable drive into a deadly one. The defense described her as remorseful, emphasizing that she was a devoted mother of 2 who had made a terrible mistake. Amy herself broke down on the stand, telling the court she would never forgive herself for what happened. Still, the evidence was overwhelming. The speed, the alcohol, the devastation left behind. The jury convicted her of second-degree vehicular manslaughter and assault by auto. In 2013, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison, a term some considered lenient given the fatality. Public reaction was divided. Many believed her celebrity status had shielded her from a harsher penalty. After serving about 2.5 years, Amy was released, determined to rebuild her life. But her case wasn't over. Over the next several years, prosecutors challenged the sentence repeatedly, arguing that it was too light under state guidelines. 2 appellate courts agreed, and her punishment was reviewed again and again. Each new hearing brought headlines and heartache for both families. By 2020, a decade after the crash, the court ruled that the earlier sentence failed to reflect the seriousness of the crime. Amy Locane was ordered back to prison to serve a new term of 8 years. When she returned to custody, Amy spoke openly about accountability. She said she accepted the decision and wanted to use her story to warn others about the dangers of driving under the influence. In interviews conducted from prison, she said, "If my experience can stop one person from doing what I did, then at least something good can come from it." For the Seaman family, no ruling could undo their loss. Helene Seaman had been a beloved wife, mother, and community volunteer. A life ended by one careless night. For Amy, the contrast was haunting. Years of fame and recognition reduced to a cautionary tale about alcohol, ego, and tragedy. She was eventually released after completing her sentence, but her acting career never recovered. Today, Amy Locane's name serves as a sobering reminder that one decision, a drive taken after too many drinks, can destroy lives in seconds. That was the story of Amy Locane, a case that showed how fame offers no immunity from consequence. Up next, another story where a single moment of recklessness changed everything. Number 5. Victoria Vetri. The sound of a gunshot broke the stillness of a Los Angeles apartment one autumn morning in 2010. Inside, police found a man bleeding on the floor and a woman trembling nearby. A woman who had once graced the covers of magazines and walked red carpets beside the stars of Rosemary's Baby. That woman was Victoria Vetri, a name once synonymous with beauty and promise. Within hours, her face would reappear in headlines, not for a new film or photo shoot, but for an act of violence that ended her Hollywood legacy. Victoria's story began like that of so many golden era hopefuls. Born in 1944 in Los Angeles, she grew up in the shadow of the studios, dreaming of the screen. By the 1960s, she was everywhere, modeling, acting, and eventually becoming Playboy's Playmate of the Year in 1968. Under the name Angela Dorian, she was celebrated for her charm and natural elegance. Small movie parts followed, including a role in Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby, which seemed to promise a bright career. But Hollywood can be fickle. As the years passed, the offers slowed, the fame dimmed, and Victoria slipped quietly out of the spotlight. By her 60s, she was living a modest life in Los Angeles with her husband, Bruce Rathgeb, a musician and longtime companion. Friends later said the couple's relationship was complicated, loving at times, volatile at others. In September 2010, that volatility erupted. After a heated argument inside their apartment, Victoria retrieved a handgun. In a flash of anger and confusion, she pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Bruce in the upper body. He survived, but the damage, physical and emotional, was permanent. Police arrived to find the scene chaotic and tense. Victoria told officers she believed Bruce was reaching for a weapon, claiming she had acted in fear. Detectives, however, found no evidence to support that. She was arrested on the spot and charged with attempted murder, a stunning headline for a woman once celebrated as one of Hollywood's classic beauties. The media quickly resurrected her past fame, dubbing it the Playmate shooting. For many who remembered her from the 1960s, it was hard to reconcile the glamorous starlet with the handcuffed figure led from her apartment. The legal battle that followed lasted nearly 2 years. In court, Victoria appeared frail but composed, often glancing toward her husband, who, despite his injuries, survived to testify. Prosecutors argued that the act was deliberate, driven by anger and alcohol. The defense countered that the shooting had been impulsive, not premeditated. In 2011, Victoria reached a plea agreement, reducing the charge to attempted voluntary manslaughter. She accepted responsibility, telling the court she never meant to end anyone's life. least of all the man she loved. When sentencing came, the judge acknowledged her remorse but emphasized the seriousness of the crime. Victoria Vetri was sentenced to 9 years in state prison. The woman once photographed beneath soft studio lights now faced the stark glare of a prison cell. It was a devastating fall from grace, from movie sets and magazine spreads to numbered uniforms and routine counts. Behind bars, Victoria kept largely to herself. Those who met her inside said she spoke openly about her mistakes, teaching art classes and mentoring younger inmates. After serving roughly 7 years, she was released on parole in 2018, stepping back into a world that barely remembered the stardom she once held. Today, Victoria lives quietly, far removed from the glamour of her youth. Her story stands as a haunting echo of Hollywood's darker side, how fame can fade, tempers can destroy, and a single violent moment can erase decades of accomplishment. That was the story of Victoria Vetri, a woman who went from silver screen beauty to prison inmate, proving that even those once bathed in spotlight are not immune to shadows. Up next, another case where the past and the present collided in tragedy. Number 6. Allison Mack. For years, she was the smiling face of a hit TV series. The loyal friend, the bright reporter, the girl next door. But behind the wholesome image of Smallville actress Allison Mack was a secret life that would stun both Hollywood and the world. By 2019, the woman who once played a hero on screen would stand in a federal courtroom accused of crimes involving coercion, manipulation, and control. All tied to a shadowy group known as NXIVM. Allison Mack's rise seemed innocent enough. Born in Germany in 1982 and raised in California, she began acting as a child. Her breakout came in 2001 when she was cast as Chloe Sullivan in Smallville, the long-running series about Superman's early years. Audiences loved her character's quick wit and warmth, and for a decade, she seemed to embody the perfect blend of talent and humility. Off-camera, she spoke about self-improvement, mentorship, and building confidence, ideals that would later take a darker turn. In the mid-2000s, Allison was introduced to NXIVM, an organization that presented itself as a self-help and leadership program. Founded by a man named Keith Ranya, NXIVM promised to unlock human potential through seminars and personal development workshops. Many who joined described feeling inspired at first. Ranya was charismatic and surrounded by well-educated, successful followers. To outsiders, it looked like a motivational community. But inside, NXIVM was something far more sinister. A pyramid of control built on fear, loyalty, and secrecy. As Allison grew closer to Ranya, her role within NXIVM deepened. She became one of his most trusted lieutenants, helping to form a secret subgroup known as DOS, short for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, Latin for Master over Slave Women. Members were told it was an empowerment circle for women. In reality, it was a system of domination. Women were branded with Raniere's initials, forced into obedience, and made to provide collateral, personal secrets, photos, or damaging information to ensure their silence. Prosecutors later revealed that Allison played a major part in recruiting new members, convincing them that joining DOS would help them grow stronger. The truth began to unravel in 2017 when several former members escaped the group and spoke publicly. Their stories were horrifying, accounts of psychological manipulation and extreme control. The FBI launched an investigation uncovering a network of coercion operating under the guise of self-help. In 2018, both Keith Ranya and Allison Mack were arrested and charged with racketeering, forced labor conspiracy, and related crimes. When Allison appeared in court, she looked nothing like the confident actress fans remembered. Dressed simply, she broke down as prosecutors detailed how she had helped maintain the system that exploited vulnerable women. Her attorneys argued that she had been manipulated by Ranye, drawn into his influence like so many others. In April 2019, she pleaded guilty to racketeering and racketeering conspiracy, admitting that she had recruited women and extracted damaging personal material from them. In a letter to the judge before sentencing, Allison wrote, "I was lost. I believed I was helping women, and I was wrong." The court recognized her cooperation in helping dismantle NXIVM and her remorse for her actions. In 2021, she was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, a significant reduction from the potential 40 years she could have faced. She also paid a $20,000 fine and accepted the lifelong consequences of her involvement. Keith Raniere, the group's founder, received a 120-year prison sentence for his leadership role, while other members faced varying terms. The entire story became the focus of documentaries and podcasts, most notably HBO's The Vow, which chronicled the cult's inner workings and Allison's transformation from TV star to convicted felon. After serving her sentence, Allison Mack was released in 2023. Since then, she has kept out of public view, issuing a brief apology to her victims and supporters, saying she is committed to reflection and change. For many, though, her name remains permanently tied to one of the most disturbing celebrity scandals in recent memory. A warning about how power and persuasion can distort even the best intentions. That was the story of Allison Mack, a case that revealed how a promise of self-discovery became a system of control. Up next, another story where fame turned into infamy in ways no one could have predicted. Number 7. Anna Rene Moore. It started with a love story, or at least that's how it looked on the surface. A charming actress, a successful doctor, and a connection that seemed to promise trust, companionship, and glamour. But behind the smiles and messages was something far colder. What the Malibu physician thought was romance was, in truth, a carefully constructed illusion. One that would cost him millions and land Anna Rene Moore, a Los Angeles actress, behind bars. Anna Rene Moore's path to the spotlight was much like countless other Hollywood hopefuls. She came to Los Angeles chasing opportunity, working small roles and side jobs, carving out an image that blended confidence with allure. By all accounts, she was clever, ambitious, and persuasive, qualities that might have helped in acting, but soon found a darker purpose. Somewhere between auditions and appearances, Anna stepped off the path of performance and into manipulation. Her story became less about scripts and more about schemes. According to court filings later reported by the Los Angeles Times, Anna met a well-known Malibu doctor and began a relationship that seemed genuine. The two grew close, exchanging affection and plans for a shared future. But behind that affection was a calculated strategy. Prosecutors would later reveal that Anna had carefully studied her target, his habits, wealth, and emotional vulnerabilities. What he saw as love, she saw as leverage. Over time, she convinced him to invest in what she described as new business ventures, promising returns, secure opportunities, and even philanthropic causes. He believed her completely. By the time doubts arose, it was too late. Money had vanished through a web of false accounts, fake paperwork, and emotional manipulation. The losses stretched into the millions, and the trust that once defined their relationship was replaced by betrayal. When the doctor finally went to authorities, investigators uncovered a trail of deception that reached far beyond one relationship. They found records of false identities, fraudulent companies, and fabricated stories designed to extract money. Anna had used her acting skills not on a stage, but in real life, playing the role of the perfect partner while draining her victims' finances. The FBI called it one of the more emotionally driven frauds they had seen, combining romance, deceit, and greed into a single, devastating scheme. In 2022, Anna Rene Moore was charged in federal court with wire fraud and identity theft, crimes that carried severe penalties. Facing overwhelming evidence, she pleaded guilty to participating in a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. In her plea agreement, she admitted to exploiting the victim's trust for personal gain. Prosecutors argued that she had manipulated not just money, but emotions, turning love itself into a tool for crime. During her sentencing, the courtroom was silent as the extent of the fraud was read aloud. The judge acknowledged her intelligence and charisma, but said those same traits had been weaponized against another human being. Federal prosecutors recommended a sentence of 41 months, just over 3 years and 5 months, emphasizing the calculated nature of her deception. The court agreed. Anna was sentenced accordingly and ordered to pay restitution to her victim. For Anna, the glamour of Hollywood had long since faded. The actress who once dreamed of stardom was now another name on a federal docket. A cautionary tale about how performance and manipulation can blur beyond recognition. Behind bars, she reportedly expressed regret, telling the court she had lost herself in greed and fantasy. For the Malibu doctor, the financial damage was painful, but the emotional wound ran deeper. He had believed in love and instead found betrayal. His story, detailed in the Los Angeles Times, became a reminder of how easily image and charm can disguise motive. When Anna Rene Moore was led away to begin her sentence, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. An actress, once trained to play convincing roles, had lived her most destructive performance off-screen. That was the story of Anna Rene Moore, a tale of deceit wrapped in romance, where fame and fraud collided under the California sun. Up next, another case where illusion and reality turned fatally entwined. Number 8. Lori Loughlin. For decades, she was America's favorite TV mom, warm, graceful, and wholesome. But in 2019, Lori Loughlin, the beloved Full House actress who once embodied family values on screen, became the face of a real-life scandal that stunned the nation. The story would expose privilege, deception, and a hidden network that turned college admissions into a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. Lori's rise had been picture perfect. Born in Queens, New York, she began modeling as a teenager before moving into acting. By the late 1980s, she was a household name, starring as Aunt Becky on Full House, a role that defined her as a symbol of kindness and integrity. Fans admired her both for her career and her personal life. She was married to fashion designer Massimo Giannulli, founder of the Massimo clothing brand, and together they raised 2 daughters in Los Angeles. From the outside, theirs looked like a dream family. Successful, close-knit, and built on hard work. But beneath that polished image, something else was happening. In 2019, federal investigators uncovered what they called Operation Varsity Blues, a sprawling bribery scheme that helped wealthy parents secure spots for their children at elite universities. The mastermind, William Rick Singer, had built a system that allowed parents to cheat the admissions process through fake athletic profiles, falsified test scores, and bribes disguised as charitable donations. Among the dozens of names on the list of participants was Lori Loughlin. According to prosecutors, Lori and her husband paid $500,000 to Singer's organization to have their 2 daughters falsely designated as recruits for the University of Southern California's rowing team, even though neither girl had ever rowed competitively. The photos submitted to the university showed the daughters posing on rowing machines, a staged attempt to make the story believable. The plan worked until the FBI got involved. When the scandal broke, the public reaction was explosive. Headlines dominated every news outlet. Fans who had grown up watching Aunt Becky struggle to teach moral lessons on TV now saw her accused of manipulating the very system her character would have condemned. Lori and Massimo insisted they were innocent, claiming they believed the payments were legitimate donations. But emails and recordings told a different story. one that showed awareness and intent. In 2020, facing mounting evidence, both pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges. Lori admitted to one count of conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud. In August of that year, she stood before a judge and apologized, her voice breaking as she said she wished she could go back and do things differently. The judge called the crime a crime driven by privilege and entitlement. Lori Loughlin was sentenced to 2 months in federal prison, fined $150,000, and ordered to complete 100 hours of community service. Her husband received a 5-month sentence. In October 2020, Lori reported to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, the same facility where other high-profile white-collar offenders had served time. For the actress who once symbolized decency, it was a moment of public reckoning. She was released in December 2020 after completing her sentence. Since then, Lori has slowly returned to public life, taking part in charity work and resuming limited acting roles, though her reputation remains deeply divided. To some, she represents accountability, a reminder that no amount of fame or fortune places anyone above the law. To others, her case is a symbol of how wealth can distort fairness, even in something as sacred as education. The Varsity Blues scandal went far beyond Lori Loughlin. It exposed a hidden reality, how pressure, pride, and privilege drove dozens of parents to gamble with their integrity for their children's success. But because of her fame, Lori became the face of the entire operation, the perfect symbol of how quickly a career built on virtue can crumble under the weight of real-world choices. That was the story of Lori Loughlin, a case that turned a cherished TV figure into a cautionary tale of fame, fortune, and the high price of dishonesty. Up next, another story where the pursuit of perfection led straight to downfall. Number 9. Felicity Huffman. It was one of the biggest education scandals in U.S. history, and among the dozens of names caught in it, none carried more shock than hers. Felicity Huffman, the Emmy-winning star of Desperate Housewives, a respected actress known for her intelligence and authenticity, suddenly found herself at the center of the 2019 Varsity Blues College admissions case. What she had done wasn't violent or elaborate, but it struck a deep national nerve. A mother using privilege to tip the scales of opportunity. Before the scandal, Felicity's life seemed untouchable. Born in 1962 in New York, she built her career through decades of hard work, stage acting, indie films, and finally, television fame. Her portrayal of Lynette Scavo on Desperate Housewives made her one of the most admired women on screen, relatable, sharp, and fiercely maternal. Off-screen, she shared those same values, a devoted wife to actor William H. Macy and mother of 2 daughters. Fans saw her as the grounded opposite of Hollywood excess. But even good intentions can turn into something darker when fear and pressure take hold. In 2017, her oldest daughter was preparing for college. Like many parents, Felicity worried about scores and expectations. That anxiety led her to William Rick Singer, a college consultant who promised to guarantee results through what he called the side door, a secret network of bribery and test tampering. Felicity agreed to pay $15,000 to have a proctor secretly correct her daughter's SAT answers after the test. The goal was simple: a better score, a better chance at admission. What she didn't realize was that Singer's operation was under investigation by the FBI. When federal agents finally moved in, Felicity's name appeared in the documents, a stunning revelation. On March 12, 2019, she was arrested at her Los Angeles home in front of her family. The story spread instantly. The actress, once celebrated for her integrity, was now accused of conspiracy and fraud. Unlike some others caught in the scheme, Felicity didn't fight the charges. Within a month, she issued a public apology and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud and honest services mail fraud. In her statement to the court, Felicity said, "I am deeply ashamed of what I have done. I was frightened and thought I was acting out of love for my daughter, but I have betrayed her and the public." Her voice cracked as she read those words, a moment that played across every major network. The honesty and remorse were real, but so were the consequences. On September 13th, 2019, Felicity Huffman was sentenced to 14 days in federal prison, fined $30,000, and ordered to complete 250 hours of community service. The judge told her the sentence reflected both accountability and the recognition that she had taken responsibility early. Many saw it as light punishment. Others viewed it as an important precedent. For Felicity, it was a defining fall. Not from luxury, but from trust. She reported to the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California, the same facility later used by Loughlin. Inside, Felicity kept quiet, reading, working in the library, and serving her time without incident. She was released after 11 days, 3 days early for good behavior. When she emerged, she didn't make speeches or seek sympathy. Instead, she quietly began her community service and slowly rebuilt her life. Her brief imprisonment became one of the most discussed moments of the scandal. The image of Felicity Huffman, a respected actress in a beige prison uniform, became symbolic of how even small acts of dishonesty can ripple outward into public shame. She later said the hardest part wasn't the sentence, but the realization that she had betrayed her daughter's trust. She asked, "Why didn't you believe I could do it myself?" Today, Felicity lives privately, occasionally returning to acting in smaller roles and advocacy work. Her case remains one of the clearest examples of accountability, proof that even in Hollywood, fame cannot erase the consequences of choice. That was the story of Felicity Huffman, a lesson in pressure, privilege, and the price of crossing the line between love and corruption. Up next, another story where the pursuit of success came at a devastating cost. Number 10. Ranya Rao. When actress Ranya Rao stepped off her international flight at Bengaluru's Kempegowda Airport, no one expected what would follow. To airport staff, she looked like any other glamorous traveler returning from abroad, confident, composed, and radiant under the terminal lights. But moments later, customs officers made a discovery that would shock the Indian film industry. Hidden beneath her clothing was over 14 kilograms of gold, meticulously wrapped and strapped to her body. Within hours, the rising star of Kannada cinema was under arrest, accused of one of the boldest smuggling attempts ever linked to an Indian celebrity. Ranya Rao's story began far from scandal. Born in Karnataka, she entered the world of South Indian cinema in the mid-2000s with dreams of stardom. Her debut film, Manakya, earned her quick recognition, and her performances in regional hits helped her build a name as one of Kannada cinema's promising new faces. On screen, she was poised, confident, and graceful, an image that audiences embraced. But as her career plateaued, those closest to her said she struggled with the pressures of fame, dwindling opportunities, and the high cost of maintaining a public persona in an industry that moved fast and forgot even faster. In early 2022, investigators later said, Ranya became involved with a network that specialized in gold smuggling, moving large quantities of undeclared gold from the Middle East into India to evade taxes and import duties. The profit margins were enormous, and couriers were often promised generous payouts for carrying concealed shipments. According to reports, Ranya was approached because of her fame. Customs officers would be less likely, smugglers believed, to suspect a known actress. For Ranya, it may have seemed like an easy way to solve financial troubles. What she didn't know was that the authorities were already tracking the syndicate's movements. When Ranya landed in Bengaluru after a flight from Dubai, customs officials noticed inconsistencies in her declaration forms and travel patterns. A routine screening turned into a detailed inspection, and the officers discovered gold bars and jewelry weighing more than 14 kilograms strapped to her torso, thighs, and back with elastic bands. The total value exceeded several crore rupees. She was immediately detained under suspicion of violating India's Customs Act and the Conservation of Foreign Exchange and Prevention of Smuggling Activities Act, COFEPOSA. The story exploded across Indian news outlets. Actress caught with gold at airport, the headlines read, as television panels debated how someone from a respected film background could become involved in smuggling. Social media lit up with disbelief, memes, and moral outrage. Within hours, Ranya went from film star to national headline. Her pictures from movie premieres now paired with images of her being escorted by police through the terminal. During questioning, Ranya initially denied knowledge of the gold, claiming someone else had placed it in her luggage. But investigators found evidence suggesting prior coordination with handlers abroad. After days of interrogation, she reportedly admitted partial involvement, saying she had been persuaded into acting as a carrier. Prosecutors argued that her fame had made her bold, believing she could walk past security unchecked. Her trial was swift, given the weight of evidence. In mid-2023, the Bengaluru court convicted Ranya Rao under COFEPOSA for gold smuggling and sentenced her to 1 year in judicial custody. She was also ordered to forfeit the seized gold and pay fines under customs law. For a film star who once graced magazine covers, the verdict was devastating. In her statement to the court, she said, "I lost sight of who I was and what I stood for. I thought I could outsmart the system, but I was wrong." Ranya served her sentence quietly, away from cameras and social media. When she was released after a year, she faced an industry that had already moved on. Her films were pulled from streaming platforms, brand deals dissolved, and public sympathy was limited. Yet some fans still called for her return, arguing that she had paid her debt and deserved a second chance. Today, Ranya Rao lives largely out of the public eye, her career uncertain, but her notoriety permanent. Her case remains a striking example of how fame can become both shield and snare, a reminder that even in the glittering world of cinema, temptation can turn dreams into scandal. That was the story of Ranya Rao, a cautionary tale of greed, glamour, and the heavy price of a golden mistake. Up next, another case where ambition and deception collided beneath the spotlight.